So, so Carolyn, always a pleasure to be connecting with you again and speaking with you. So, how are you?
Well, I'm mainly fine. It's very hot around here, which is disappointing in the fall, but it's gorgeous. And as I mentioned to you before we started, I had a fall last week, and so I got a bit banged up, but I'm hoping that my brain will continue to work
Mhm.
for the course of our talk.
Well, I have no doubt that your brain will keep on working and we'll test it through this conversation we'll have now. So that will be a live kind of kind of validation. But I mean, just before we came on air, you'd mentioned that the next talk perhaps have the subject of looking at or speaking about, radical changes and great positive things which are coming through this kind of upheaval, but how we don't often see it so obviously because we're looking, in a different direction. And that reminded me of the kind of metaphor of like the farmer plowing the soil. Every year you have to dig up the soil and move it around so you break it up for new growth, such as, breaking the topsoil so the new seedlings could be planted and to grow up. And I think it's the nature of both the human curiosity, or the way we're always focusing on what seems to be the great danger, and our mainstream media does a great job of focusing us on the danger and those issues. But in fact, if it wasn't for this breakup of the topsoil, we wouldn't have the possibility for new seedlings. So maybe, I think we have to give more focus, especially at this time, on these great seedlings that are coming through, and how this is a time for great new growth, despite the outer extremities or the superficial signs. The deeper signs is of new growth. So, and I think that's a subject dear to your heart.
It is, and I'm also very interested in how we resist that as a species. We say no to it because change is scary. And I mean, I immediately go to the ultimate, which is we're afraid of the next phase of our being, which needs death
Mm-hmm.
um, before it can change. And so I think what we are experiencing on the social and human plane are many deaths, and we're scared out of our wits, as well we ought to be. And our response to fear is often violence. So we're seeing a lot of that, and and we can get lost in that. And as you're saying, we do get lost in that. But I believe, and I'm also observing, that something much more profound is happening at the same moment. Um, because there are the new people who are getting born into the world, but there's also I see it as an opening of consciousness. It's almost like something has been cracked open and is destabilized. And what is coming from it is sort of like weeds that come up in the cracks in the soil. Something new is being born. And I'm watching it mostly in the arts. That's where I see it. Um, but the level of brilliance that I am witnessing in in the arts is beyond anything I've ever seen before. And it's been, as an artist myself, I it's what I have strived for, but has been kind of outside the normalized ken
Mm-hmm.
of the society. So I've written all these books, but they were way ahead of their time. And now what I'm watching is the young people creating at the level that I envision, even though I haven't always been able to actually produce it. But there is a level of, and how would I describe it? It's a level of subtlety, subtle complexity that is based not so much in thinking as in feeling, and feeling on the level of all the senses, perceiving the world not mentally, or not only mentally, but perceiving it emotionally through color, form, movement, sound, all the arts that are expressing things outside of verbal expression. So that's where I am mostly seeing it and getting so excited that I cry. Like, there it is, there it is. So what I mentioned to you when we exchanged notes, which any Americans listening will recognize, is the theater play Hamilton, which is a musical rap version of the story of one of the founding fathers of America. And it's an incredible story. I mean, the history is amazing. But what this young man, who is a Puerto Rican, has done with it is nothing short of genius. And the proof of the genius, the genuine genius, is how people have been reacting to it. So for the first 2 years that it was playing on Broadway, you couldn't get a ticket. And an ordinary ticket was over $100. That meant a lot of people couldn't even get to see it. It has been on Broadway. It is now also, it's a stage play. It's also a film, and I think it's 2 films, 2 different films, so that it's available to everybody. And it's just the story of this man who was sort of he came from somewhere in the West Indies, arrived in this country, maybe as a stowaway or something on a ship, and became one of the founding fathers of the United States. And, every kind of drama you can imagine, in fact, happened in those days to those people trying to create a government and a country. And he was part of it and got killed in the middle. So, it's a very dramatic story. And it is brilliant, and it is done, written, composed, not only musically, but in the rap style, which, I mean, if you don't know if the British audience doesn't know what that means, it's a very fast talking, sort of street talk.
Yeah, we know rap. Yeah,
You know what rap is. Okay. Well, imagine a whole play in which the founding fathers and their relatives are all singing rap, telling the story. It's an amazing conglomeration of ideas that got put together brilliantly. And it has reached everybody. There is nobody in this country who doesn't know about Hamilton. So and the composer of it, a man named Lin-Manuel Miranda, is a genius, and also a social activist. So he is using this and now his great fame as a way of educating the populace, and doing it with their language, which is rap, poetry, everything rhyming. And you say it so fast, you have to know how to listen, which the young people do know. People like me can't quite keep up, but the young people, they talk in that jive. And he's done a 2.5-hour Broadway play. It's astonishing, but he's not the only one. There are lots of geniuses out there, and they're just, sort of operating out of wherever they come from, which tends not to be the higher classes. And so they speak of what they know and do it very cleverly and brilliantly through all the media: music, dance, theater, poetry, novels. So when I think of, where is the hope? That's where I look. And since they have a real audience, an audience who for the most part has not really been approached by the society itself, because they're lower class or considered lower class, that's where the energy is, and that's where the power is. Even though we're being shown what's going on in the tech world and in the economic world, which is madness and very dangerous, I think. So okay, the arts are giving me hope.
Mhm. Wonderful. I mean, you said so much there. I mean, there's so many threads to kind of take off that. Very, very rich. I mean, some of the things that you said, such as, um, these transformative forces are working through people, and they can pick up a person and flow genius through different people. And I think it's great that a lot of these people are what you may call under the radar, because the system that we operate in tends to focus on the center, like you said, the hierarchy, and focus on the mainstream. Whereas real change, as you've indicated, comes from the periphery. Rome collapsed because the intruders came from the periphery, and the center was corrupt and it collapsed. And I think that's a kind of model where change comes from unexpected quarters from the periphery. Transformative forces work through different agents in the periphery, and especially at times like now when the center is corrupt, it doesn't take much to bring it down, and these new impulses come in and become the new paradigm. That's how paradigm shifts occur. But I love what you say about these creative forces. They're not, we think in terms of change, in terms of technology, invention, and that. But these creative forces are light, color, movement, and beyond this kind of the normal mainstream senses. What you see and what you believe has to be it. No, it's these forces are coming through in all these different movements. So, and also what you say, I think the mainstream is naturally hardwired to resist. That's why our first mainstream kind of reaction is denial or resistance, because we always seem to be programmed, I think, or culturally conditioned to maintain the status quo at the center. And maybe of course I'll get your opinion on that, but when these forces come from the periphery, it seems like this is the new growth, the new wave.
Right. Oh, I just have so many thoughts. I think the periphery, those of us who are not in the center, have a quality of freedom that those in the center do not have. But then again, those in the center, to a great extent, have chosen to be there because they define it as power, I guess. So it's very slippery. And since I'm sort of nowhere, and I'm in whatever class I'm in amongst the artists, I think, the unrecognized artists. I don't feel that I have any power, except that as I get older, I recognize something about subtle power versus, punching power. And that doesn't need any action but internal action, is what I'm realizing the older I get. And it's what has been called prayer. It's what has been called energy healing. It's not, you can't look at it, but you can learn to feel it. And I think the society, as we have known it in our lifetimes, has been anti-feeling it. I mean, we're not taught to do that. Children are not honored for their intuitive take on anything, although that's changing as more and more people are homeschooling. But it's been a kind of hard, sharp-edged way of understanding life and the world versus this softer, diffuse, multi-sensory, multi-dimensional, whatever those words mean, way of understanding and experiencing our lives, which has not been honored until very recent. So people like myself in school flunked because my natural way is a kind of intuitive, artistic feeling way. And that was not okay. That wasn't, what they call the hard science. I don't do hard science and try not to do hard anything because that's, and all I'm doing is touching the edge of the brick, and I'm not interested in the edge of the brick. So, it's coming into the educational model, not so much in the mainstream yet, but just in the kind of homeschooling efforts that now are happening all over the place, because public school teaching is basically, I mean, by its own avowal, it's basically preparing you for an industrial job.
Mm-hmm.
So that there is that shift, that, and the new people coming in are much more sensitive, or maybe behave much more sensitive. I don't know, but their needs are not what I call the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
Although that's not fair to those people who are number people, and some, including some people in my family. But it's subtlety that we are learning, and that implies artistry. Mm-hmm. So that's the growing edge. I don't think it's the cutting sword, because it's softer than that. Mm-hmm. Who is it that wrote the poem, I am the rain, let me work?
I can't recall.
And I think it's I am the rain, let me work. Or maybe I am the air, let me work. So we're moving into a new, hopefully a real paradigm. Mm-hmm. And let's see what happens.
Well, again, you say so many things in just a few minutes. But I mean, I love how you call it subtle power, and I think that's something that we should make a notice of, because again, we've been conditioned about this hard power, and these systems that we're conditioned to are systems of centralization, and it's their club, and they want you to join it. And when you join it, you start to get invested in these power systems, so you've got too much to lose, and that's the easiest way to kind of get people on board, is to let them in on the secret, saying, come in on this is what we're doing. And then once the person feels they have power, and power is what they interpret as power over other people, they don't want to give it up either. So the status quo sustains itself with this kind of external power structure. And of course, that the easiest kind of power is this very basic brute force power over others. But power over oneself, in a discipline, in awareness, perceptivity, letting these kind of energies flow, being receptive to changes. This is what I think we'd call the subtle power, is that realizing that it doesn't go in straight lines. Nature doesn't do straight lines. It's flowing everywhere, and I think, as you said, subtle power it's very hard to grasp it if you don't have freedom. And if you don't have freedom, is when you have too much to lose. And that's part of the centralization. And that's why I think, from speaking for myself, because I'm not in my line of work, I'm not seeking fame or sales or this type of thing. I feel like I've got complete freedom, because I just do what I wish to do. But of course, if you're in the fame game, or in the industry game, or the culture industry, you have to play by their rules. So therefore, you can't say your own truths, because you'll be within this ball of cultural censorship. So this power ball is nefarious, and it keeps you bound by its rules, And if you want to game by it, then you can't speak beyond it. And so subtle power means you can live by your integrity. You don't live or die by the system, or you don't make or break it by the system. And I think now the system is crumbling. A lot more of these new seeds, or new minds, or younger people coming up saying, well, I've got no system to protect or which sustains me, so it gives me freedom to move. And I think, going back to the early metaphor about breaking the topsoil, that's so necessary, because when the topsoil is fixed, you can't break through, because there's no movement. So all this upheaval we're witnessing is a very necessary breaking up of the old structures to get movement flowing, to get subtle energy flowing. And basically, I think it's bringing down this centralization of power, of control, of even of I suppose people always look to the center because they felt that's where the dependency is. But there's no dependency now. There's no trust. People don't trust the central power structures. So it's all coming back now to the self. So subtle self-power, self-trust, trusting in others around you. And now this is, I think, a momentous moment because we see in these huge monoliths, it's like David and Goliath is tripping over his own feet. And I think that's what we're witnessing now, this tripping over of the monolith, the great structure, and this great wave of fresh air of freedom is blowing through, but we have to be receptive to it and not programmed into the trance consensus. So,
and more than that, I think we have to recognize that there is a block insisting upon keeping the old structure.
mm-hmm.
So it's not as if everybody wants to make this shift. There are a lot of people who are very afraid of the shift. And, I mean, the whole Trump phenomenon in this country is an example of well, it's an example of sort of how resistant we are to change. So, and I also want to make a comment about the soil needing to be broken up. I don't agree with that. I think the soil, nature knows how to produce next year's plants. We don't, farming requires breaking up the soil, but nature does not require it. It's a built-in process, and the power of a seed to break through that crust is very, very strong. And so that image actually gives me a lot of hope, because we don't need an outside source to break it up, in fact. So that was one thing I wanted to comment on. And the other is the people, those who are being the most creative, as I witness it, and the most radical, tend to be people who have been enslaved in one way or another, in one place or another. So they are not constrained, ideally, by the same things that a person who is well established on a piece of soil somewhere in the world is vulnerable. So in order to survive, they have to really use all of their strength, all of their imagination, and claim their own particularities, their own ways of being, which are different from what the colonialists tell them is correct. So that was just the statement I wanted.
I mean, I'll get back to another point you made, but I very much like what you said about, we don't need this external intervention because, as you say, this new growth will come through anyway. And, I suppose the humans tend to think that we have to, get in the way of things instead of getting out of the way of things.
Right.
And you mentioned colonialism, and just as we speak all around in Africa, there's been recently a rise in kind of coups of people rising up in the military, taking coups to kick out the French colonialists. Because a lot of African countries are still owned behind the scenes by the French colonial government. And so, of course, the French government is trying to get back in and get their power back, because in these African countries, they are exploiting the resources of the country for mining, for rare metals, etc. So right now, I think we've seen another wave of people say, look, I want to get rid of all these, these ancient archaic power structures which have been, taking, over our heads for so long. And I think this is all part of this kind of natural waves of change.
Yeah, it's a very exciting time to be alive if you don't sort of shrivel with terror in the midst of it, because it's very, very frightening. and very unstable. And it's one of the reasons that I feel so strongly about fostering the young people in every way I can. So when I discovered that Lin-Manuel Miranda was doing that with his great success of this crazy rap production, I just felt, okay, we're in good hands. You know, we're going to do this. Because when somebody like that becomes a matinee idol, then you know you have the society behind you, which wasn't true before. I mean, it's at that level of sort of entertainment that I think it has to arise rather than with the philosophers.
Yeah. And Carolyn, you know, coming on the back of this idea of colonialism, and you were saying like how a lot of people who are coming from that area are now, I suppose, you know, the movements, the new movements and the shifts are not coming from the top down, on, you know, and they're not, the top down are not controlling these new movements. But I also think that coming out of a kind of, let's call it a kind of indentured kind of servitude, but it's not only physically, it's mentally as well. A lot of people have been hoodwinked, if you know that phrase, have been scammed, because they've been trusting in the mainstream authorities and what they tell us. And then I think a lot of people are waking up and realizing that, you know, what they've been told is baloney, you know, and they've been tricked. And I think a lot of perceptual awakening is going on. And so you've got people who are coming from physical situational circumstances who want to create change, people who are waking up and realizing that they've been, you know, the blinkers are being put over them, and they're frustrated or angry that they've been kind of pushed down and suppressed mentally, emotionally, cognitively. And I think all these wave of change, as you said, it's going to come from perhaps the places where the traditional power has not resided. It's going to come from a place where social status is not an issue. Racial, cultural, sexual backgrounds are not an issue, because these are the old controlling kind of categories. So when you get a new spurt, it's like nature blows the seeds in the wind. You don't know which seeds are going to fall in the field, and they're all going to be mixed. You can't border off the field from the wind. And I think the wind of change is blowing, to use that cliche, but therefore all the seeds are getting mixed, and all the old kind of categories don't have any kind of, you know, don't have a say anymore in what's going to be unfolding.
Well, I think what is happening at a deeper level is a raising of consciousness, which means, as I understand it, a raising of frequency. And that is built into the cosmos, you know, not only to humanity or even our planet, but it's happening on a cosmic level. At least I hope so. But that is what I have been observing for a long time. And it shows in different ways. And of course, we see both the personal and the social ramification of that. And the first response is to resist it. So we've been doing variations on the theme of resistance for my whole lifetime, which started during the Second World War. So, and all of that is a ramification of terror. Oh my God, they're going to take the floor out from under me. That kind of terror. How do I stop it? So all of, you know, fascism, all this economic hoo-ha, mistakeism, I think, and all this resistance to new ways of thinking, which I've been observing for as long as I can remember. The fear that comes with thinking in bigger terms than our culture or our religions allow us to think. So I see it at that level. And it's why I do what I do in the world, is to kind of be the clown and say, look here, you know, look at my shoelaces. They're pink, aren't they? Ha-ha. You know, to make, to play the game, but with an understanding of where I am playing it, what's happening, and why the game has to be played. And there are many of us around, more and more as I get older, who are involved in the game defining it however they define it.
Mm-hmm.
But it's happening multidimensionally. It's happening all over the place. Even as all the other stuff, which is much louder and has a hammer and goes bang bang, even as that is happening. And the trick seems to me to be that I not get afraid of the hammer, that I, learn how to dance out of the way, and ideally laugh, help other people laugh, and say, come on over here. This is where the dance is best. And in the arts, I see that happening. In the society, it's kind of harder to come by. But I see it happening too. And I also see emotion, something that I have moved to the East Coast of the United States after living for well over half a century on the West Coast. And so I now live in the country in Vermont. But I'm getting news from my old neighborhoods near San Francisco. And what's happening there is, I'm so glad I'm not there now. It's very scary, is that young gangs are just terrorizing the population. They are breaking into it. It's like they're fearless. And the quality of their energy is something I actually admire, but I wouldn't tell anybody whose house has been broken into. But the quality of their energy is just mash it to hell. Mm-hmm. And my heart goes out to them, and they're going to get punished, and some of them are going to get killed. But on some level, I believe they know what they're doing. And it doesn't have to do with, stealing somebody's computer. Mm-hmm. It goes deeper than that, whether they're aware of it or not. So, okay, what am I even trying to say here? Is that change does not always look positive. It doesn't always start in a beautiful way. It doesn't always happen, if ever happen, without harm being done and without pushback. However, I still think that it's very, very significant that it is happening. And that at the same time, what is happening is remarkable things in the art world. And I'm seeing it, my particular interest is dance and music, but I'm seeing incredible things happening in the dance world. And it's just, and what is that but movement of the body through space? So it's very, very basic. And even though not that many people go to dance concerts or anything like that, it's happening. That's where I get my enthusiasm.
And your inspiration. And it's interesting you bring in energetics, and this resistance to energetics. I mean, often they do say that things which are seemingly in opposition are often working together, like this dialectic of working together to kind of push through a kind of third form. But and we've talked about subtle power, and I think it's important to connect this to frequency and vibration, because we tend to get stuck on the external extremities, the physical hard stuff. And it was the inventor Nikola Tesla who famously said, if you want to learn about the secrets of the universe, then know about energy, frequency, and vibration. And I think this story you mentioned about these youths kind of aggressively using their energy because they want to channel it somewhere, and they do. And I think this nature of resistance is perhaps a primary kind of initial response. But in the let's say the realm of energy and energetics and frequency, what you often resist, you end up entraining or corresponding to that energy. So if you're anti-war, you become entrained, that is corresponding to the energy of war, which is why how you place yourself is very important. Are you anti-war or are you peace? So if you're anti-change, your energy could actually correspond with the energy of anti, which is resistance. So it's very important that this subtle power works by understanding that the law of frequency and vibration is different from how we kind of see it externally. So resistance actually pulls us down to these lower phonetic energies, whereby the new path, which is like a parallel path, has to be an energy which is completely different from what we're used to up to now. So resistance may be claiming us in the wrong way, whereas renewal is a totally different energy.
Right. Well, thank you for that. That's exactly, I mean, you said so clearly what I think I try and base my life on. So yes, it's the positive act done with heart, creating beauty, creating love, creating newness, rather than fighting the old thing. And using your, all your genius on creating a bomb. Oppenheimer, the film Oppenheimer is getting around these days. Mm-hmm. So all of that genius, that scientific genius, went to do what? And why did nobody pick it up and say, what are we doing? This is crazy. You can't play around with the atoms of the world. Mm-hmm. But nobody did, because we were trying to win a war. And when I've questioned people about that, who are older than I, they said, well, too many lives were being lost in the war. And I just thought, well, how did you not think ahead to how many lives would be lost if you unleashed that power? And nobody has an answer to that. So what I get from that, for the first time in my life, actually, it's occurring to me now, is humility. Not to assume that we know what in the world we're doing when we are creating things that have that kind of power. So, okay, getting back to the kids running around and breaking into cars and houses. I believe in my own life that what my task is to have the best time I possibly can have, to really have fun, to do things that I love, and to do it with people I love, rather than fighting against anything with negative energy, creating the positive in every way that I possibly can, and therefore having the best possible time. So that seems to me very attractive as an idea. Is, all I have to do is have good fun, good clean fun, and I'm doing the work.
Because you have courage. I mean, you can say the truth is as simple as that, but yet it's not simple, because you have to have courage to live these truths. You say, we want this happiness and joy and doing the right thing for myself, and trying to get back to being a fully human. And you can say the truth is as simple as that, but it's not simple if you're stuck in old thinking patterns. And I think the atomic bomb is a great example of that, because it's the way we've been programmed and conditioned to think. Because of course, during the Manhattan Project, they said, well, if the US or the West doesn't get the bomb, Germany's going to create it first, so we better get there first. And it's exactly the same argument which they're using now with AI. The AI, artificial intelligence, these big corporations are saying, well, if the West doesn't develop these huge AI systems or quantum AI computing systems, then China or Russia is going to get it first, so we better do it. So but that thinking is the thinking of we're going to lose out. It's a competition, which is this aggressive, I must win at all costs. It's such an antiquated thinking, and it's going to get us into deeper trouble. So someone's got to take the courage to break away from that. Individually, we can do it because, we have different networks of relations. On a higher level, collectively, something in the species mind has got to say, we need to be courageous and say, no, that thinking is no longer needed anymore. And for me, the only kind of mode, the mode of consciousness that is open to that is a mode of receptivity, not resistance, not pushing, not competition, but receptivity to allow this consciousness, understanding and comprehension to come through us.
Yeah, we are at a tipping point. Well, we've been at a tipping point probably for my whole life and your whole life. And it's this, it's a rapid tip, but it goes in stages. And what I'm interested in is, for my own self, how do I most enjoy the learning process? How can I be most effective and live a rich life, as opposed to always fighting against whatever I don't believe in, and trying to teach everybody else by punching them in the nose.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an everyday kind of thing. We just had an example of it. I think that the noise came from a young man who lives in the same little community that I do. He doesn't know that I'm trying to keep things quiet here, but there he was. I was ready to scream out the window. Can you stop that while I'm doing this, for goodness sake? Really ready to punch him in the nose. And that was an immediate response. And it's not unusual. I who talk about all this stuff all the time. It's not an unusual, automatic, natural response. So here we are. We're humans, being humans, all of us, getting into trouble with one another. Not constantly, but a lot of the time. And so, I keep coming back to this. Where is the work? And the work is on myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, and what does that mean? Well, it means something slightly different every day. But it's all the ways in which I basically can't make room for what somebody else wants to do, because it's antithetical to what I want to do, or what I need to do, or think I need to do in the moment. So that's, I think, where my own particular rub is at this point in the world, as things come down that are outrageous. But how many things that I do are equally outrageous, except I'm used to it, and I like those things.
Yeah, that's the $64 million question. How can how can I kind of sort things out for myself? How can I live in a way that I want to be? Because I think going back to how we started this conversation, we know that this great natural change is going to come, and perhaps we should just, it's inevitable, it's going to come. It's generational change, and in all different levels, from from an energetic level, vibrational, cosmic, to the physical level, it's going to happen. And perhaps humans just have a tendency to get in their own way too much, because they're trying to change everything external to them, but not themselves. So I think the $64 million question, which I think everybody now, or many people are now turning to, is like, how can I do something different for myself? How can I bring something into my way of life and my living that's beneficial, that's necessary for this change we're going through? And this is the work on yourself, as you mentioned. We can't transform the world if we can't transform some part of ourselves first. It's this hubris to always want to change someone else, or go to someone else and say, you're doing it wrong, do this, do that. There's that old story of the old lady who saw this crow perching on her windowsill, and she grabbed it and said, you're not a very nice looking hummingbird, your beak's too long on that. And she tried to break it off and change everything. We're trying to change others into an image that we project, whereas we are the projection. We need to look at our own image. So in these times, what would you say are the most important things, that values or things we should be looking for within ourselves?
Oh, it's a good question. And I don't know that I know the answer. I don't think there's an answer.
There's no one answer. It's just personal responses.
Yeah. Well, I think for myself, it has to do with really learning how to love, and recognizing that my own life, my own personal family life, and the life of the world that I have lived through. I was born shortly after the Depression, And then was the Second World War. We lost members of the family who had gone to be soldiers, and everything unraveled from there. So finding my footing has taken all my life and continues to be what I'm trying to do. I think I've gotten to the stage in my own development that I'm ready to recognize that the work is all about learning how to love, and doing that honestly, not this sweetie pie stuff. I don't do that very well, but that I accept all the others who are on the planet with me, including the rich guys who are trying to get richer, and all that intelligence going into AI, and all the silliness, the refusal to recognize things that are clearly there, such as that in the ancient past is much more ancient than we think it is, and that those civilizations, whoever they were, knew things that we are just beginning to learn, or are not even ready to begin to learn, so that we do not represent the apex of human intelligence, which I think is a huge, not only mistake, but a game. And it's just the attitude that comes out of it, of know-it-all, and being right, just that has no place. So, and the question was, your initial question, what am I doing? Well, I'm a writer, and so I try and write about these issues in ways that are in story, in ways that are very reachable to people, and in also these short little snippets that I send out periodically, which I think you are on the list, I believe. It's and to be in my own being in the world with however many people I meet in the course of my week, be that. And I succeed to some extent, and I totally fail to another extent. And I figure that's just human, or that's just, my own limitations. But I never for a minute drop the assignment for myself. And I figure, if not me, then who? If not now, then when? So, and then I try and be okay with all of that, and not hit myself over the head because I'm not changing the world.
And not hitting someone else on the nose either for not changing the world.
Oh, I still can't quite keep my fist to myself.
So with I think with the value of love, as you've mentioned, I think honesty, self-honesty comes with it, because you've always, I mean, in our conversations, been very honest, and perhaps that comes with the feeling that there's nothing to lose, because if you're stuck in your personality, or you're invested in something external to yourself, you don't want to lose face. You're literally putting on a false face. So I think the courage for us to realize that when everything is in change, then we have to be honest, brutally honest with ourselves, and accept our limitations, because of course we have limitations. We're just kind of growing up adolescent humans, and along with that, perhaps tolerance is another major necessity, because it's intolerance that has brought us to the brinking a lot of events of unrest and anxiety and frustration with others. So in these times, you got all these elites out there, or these big wigs talking about going to Mars and changing the world through AI, and we're saying, whoa, but I can't see the integrity in that. I can't see the self-honesty in what you're saying. Let's bring it back to real core values: love, compassion, tolerance, courage, and what we've talked about. Otherwise, we're going to get taken down this roller coaster ride of all these human hubris, right at the time of this tipping point where we need to take it down to the basics.
Right. Another thing that I'm astonished that people don't automatically recognize is that we are only here for a human lifetime, which is basically less than a century.
Mhm.
And so you start something like this, just like breaking the atom in order to have a bomb for that war. And what you do is you create a maelstrom for everybody else who's going to get born into this world. We're not going to be here. All of those scientists are already gone.
Mhm.
So, oh boy, I was married to a scientist for over half a century and had this variations on this argument with him all the time. But that recognition, that sort of smallness, not smallness of thinking, that's not fair, but the limitations of thinking without recognizing that we are here during our particular lifetime, but that actually time is not going to stop when we die. The world's not going to stop. So we're making plans for this without having any idea what the this is going to look like.
Mhm.
And that the level of that ignorance, and the Yiddish word is chutzpah, that assuming that you know best for everybody else, is profound. And we've made that mistake and made that mistake and made that mistake, and we're still making that mistake.
Mhm.
Which,
Yeah.
as you can see, I have heat around.
Mhm. Yeah, it's the humans in their hubris have invented this chessboard, and they insist on moving the pieces, whether it's politics or finances, etc. These are just constructions that we've come up with, whilst we're on this planet, as you said. Like if I'm renting a house now, and my philosophy is that when I leave, I'll leave it in a better condition or that I found it, not to destroy it. And we are kind of just coming in as renters on this planet, and yet we invent all these games that then just kind of we self-hypnotize ourselves. So but I do feel that this unraveling which is coming about is necessary to really strip off all these illusions and falsity, because if you don't, the transition is going to be worse for you. So all these Instagram influencers who are pouting into their phones, and talking about, oh, I love you, darling, I love you, love me back, press like. I think the fall is going to be a harder fall for such people, because if you've got to strip everything off and get down to the basic values. Otherwise, you've got a few more rungs of the ladder to fall down, I would say.
Right. Well, what we're doing is we're shallowing the zeitgeist. And more, I mean, in my lifetime, the shallowing process has gotten shallower and shallower and shallower as we have become wealthier and wealthier and wealthier, making more and more people poorer and poorer and poorer. And then, then there's the whole education system, which is not addressing the best human at all, as far as I can see. And so, we're lost.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the important thing now is to recognize that, and to have the courage to recognize that and say, okay, we're lost in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
How can we put our heads together and figure out how to figure out where to go next? We're going to have to break trail. So in what direction do we break it? And we need to decide that together. Mm-hmm. That's pretty words, but not easy to do.
And to throw away the GPS, don't rely on technical navigation, but internal navigation. And Carolyn, maybe to kind of bring this around to a kind of closure, going back to what you mentioned on the opening about Hamilton, how the language of rap and was getting people who are often marginalized or ignored, giving them something that to kind of connect with, and to really bring the language back down to people, because the language is being hijacked into slogans, into political whatever lies, into false truths or pseudo truths. But the language of communication has to come back down to the street, to the people, to the basics. And you say bring it back to a basic communication of the heart, so we kind of get out of our false illusions, and that's perhaps the navigation ahead. Strip away your illusions, get back to the language of the self, and keep it simple.
Right, and listen to the children, because they're the ones who have to grow up here, and they are also carrying with them, I hope, and what I witness is a higher frequency level of mentalness. There is such a word. And, just we're all in the hands of what they call God. And we are. We are, however it is that you think of God. We are all, we're part of that hand. And so somehow or another, we're going to have to do this together, and each do what he or she or they are best at, which means that you have to define what you're good at. You have to recognize it and train it. And that's what the elders have to do, is help train the younger and help them accept who they are, however it is defined.
It's a nice point to end on, that each person just find out what they're good at and what they can do, and do it. Doesn't have to be anything huge or groundbreaking. Just be true to yourself and have a bit of courage and make small steps. So Carolyn, thank you again for having this chat. Always lovely to speak with you and have your honest words. So well, stay well. No breaking noses and no falling over and banging your head, I hope, until next time we speak.
Well, I'll give it the old college try.